Welcome to our special series, Voices for Equality. I'm CHERYL PREHEIM. In the next half hour, we're going to take you inside Hands-On Atlanta's annual MLK Sunday Supper. This extraordinary event honors the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. while challenging all of us to open up our hearts and minds to ways we can bring his dream to life. The Sunday Supper event started as a chance to bring corporate and community leaders from across Atlanta together for meaningful conversations about race and social justice. The idea is to set the stage with performances, speakers, and follow that up with a roundtable discussion. This year, the celebration went virtual, but that does not take away from the important focus, what we teach our kids about race. But before we get to all of that, we start with a poem by spoken word artist ASHLEE HAZE.
When I thought about what we teach our children about race, I thought back to when I was a kid. So I'm going to date myself here, but back when I was a kid, we used to get this thing called the Toys R Us catalog, and it was about this thick. And my parents would let me make a list of the things that I wanted from that book. And what that practice taught me how to do was how to dream worlds beyond where I was right then in those four walls. It taught me how to dream of things that I wanted to see in the future, things that I wanted to have for myself and for others. And so I wrote this poem as a practice on writing a wish list, on writing the things that I wish for the future. And so this poem is called A Heaven for a Black Girl. Let's say I arrived 5 minutes late, but I still don't have to wait in line. I picture myself dressed to the nines, wearing my favorite pair of Jordan 6s. In my version of heaven, I am eating crab at sunset, or samosas, or tacos, or arepas, or mangoes picked from my cousin's backyard. In my heaven, Lawrence and Issa are getting married at noon tomorrow, and I still need to finish wrapping the gift I bought and making the sweet potato pie she asked me to make. In my heaven, Stevie Wonder chimes at daybreak and lunch hour. I do believe that there's Alexa outfitted in heaven, so when Megan Thee Stallion is more fitting, well, I choose her. And I rest often, and I teach children poems on the mountain. In my heaven, a young woman in Louisville, Kentucky wakes up, hits the snooze button one too many times. Perhaps she even stops at the drive-thru on her way to work and hopes her boss ain't tripping that day. In my heaven, a young woman in Waller County, Texas plays WAP in her Toyota Corolla on the way to brunch with the girls. Or she at least lives to tell her therapist about the time she got pulled over and got a ticket she didn't deserve. In my heaven, black girls get to be themselves, regular and mundane if we want to be, smelling like shea butter and wishing and dreaming and singing to ourselves in the shower and pouring rose water in our baths and watching the moon rise from East Atlanta. In my heaven, children up the block eat every night, and their mothers make enough money to leave men who do not choose love. In my heaven, the people I elect to protect me do their jobs, and they offer the refugees food and shelter and education and a language that they understand. In this one, there are no billionaires, because what good is wealth if it does not solve the afflictions of the people? I imagine a place where my queer poetry students are safe and feel valuable and feel belonging, a world where we teach our children that all people deserve love and respect, a world where race is not even uttered on tongues because it is not useful, because who needs race when you are born worthy? Who needs bootstraps when the playing field is even? I imagine a place where our last hope for justice does not die with one woman, where justice does not only mean consequences for actions, but it means the black girl breathes. And it means the black man lives to talk smack about the Lakers with his homies another day. Hey, black girl, when is the last time you wrote yourself a heaven? When is the last time you dreamed a place where your breath was not traded for someone else's ego? A world where you could see yourself in your leaders. A world where your voice meant something. A place where you could eat your pie in peace.
Up next, we'd like to introduce you to the Harvard Diversity Project. As the assistant debate coach for the Ivy League institution, founder and CEO Brandon Fleming is leading Atlanta area high school students through an 11-month residency. This push to increase minority representation at Harvard is having a huge impact. For the past 4 years, these Atlanta teams have won Harvard's Debate Council's international residency. Before we meet a few of the incredible young scholars and hear them reflect on Dr. King's teachings, Brandon Fleming tells us a little bit more about the Harvard Diversity Project.
We are here to talk about MLK and to celebrate his legacy and his life. While it's important for us to live lives of reflection, the purpose of holidays are to make us pause for just a moment to reflect on an event or a person, and not just who they were, but the impact, the indelible impact that they made in our world. And so today we're going to reflect on MLK and his teachings and what he stood for and his dream, but not only what his dream meant for history, but what his dream means today. One of the important things for us to understand about MLK is that he was a radical fighter. However, he was also a radical lover. As a Christian man and as a preacher, he chose love as the weapon that he wielded in order to fight injustice. And that's why for us as an organization, the Harvard Diversity Project, in the spirit of MLK, has a philosophy that's love first, teach second. We believe above all, we are all called to be radical lovers and agents of change. And so in that likeness, of MLK being a spiritual warrior, there's a scripture that says God ordains strength out of the mouths of babes. And today you are not going to hear from babes. Today you are going to hear from scholars. And we're going to talk about and reflect on what MLK means with regard to education.
Straight ahead, hear from the Harvard Diversity Project scholars in just a moment. But first, a Sunday supper question to think about. What do you remember learning about race in schools? As part of the Harvard Diversity Council, we'd like to introduce you to 3 outstanding high school scholars. Christian Flournoy, a junior at the Westminster Schools. He plans to become an orthopedic surgeon. Ife Obianwu is a student at the Cobb County Center for Excellence in the Performing Arts. She aspires to pursue her goal of becoming an attorney with a career in politics. And Zayla Bryant attends Arabia Mountain High School. She's working towards becoming an entrepreneur, writer, and public speaker. With that, we'll turn it over to the Harvard Diversity Project founder and CEO, Brandon Fleming.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Let's jump into these questions very quickly and talk a little bit about MLK and current events and education and equity and all that good stuff. So the first question I want to ask you is, when we consider Dr. King's dream, his teachings and everything that he stood for, how do you think they apply to current events now?
Dr. King's battle for equality is still something that is fought for today, especially with his most notable achievement, the Voting Rights Act, being under attack. The voter suppression laws across Georgia directly oppose Dr. King's belief in equal voting rights. When talking about progress, King once said that it takes the tireless effort and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. We must stay dedicated. We must stay persistent, because his dream, no, our dream, is far from over from achieving.
I think to kind of follow with his sentiment and Brandon Fleming's, he became the reason we dare to dream radical dreams. And as a monumental and proud product of the city of Atlanta, he provides a representation of meshing fearlessness with scholarship. And I think he taught us there's more than one way to fight. As we look at legislation he was a part of, or even the messages that he preached, he exemplifies such a strong sense of, as he would say, somebodyness that makes me, along with the millions of others of activists in our time, feel confident enough to have the audacity to speak up when a wrong must be righted, which is what has helped me, along with a few of my other classmates, start our own initiatives like the Scholar Social. A nonprofit and podcast platform was made by us and for us to talk about topics like this and encourage others to do the same.
And to follow with Dr. King's dream and what he stood for equality. And while he made great advancements for us and did the work to give us basic human rights, we still have work to do. In education, the history of Black ancestors is watered down to slavery and dilutes the rich culture we possessed long before we came to America. In spaces like politics, we continue to see a lack of representation of Black people, especially Black women. So I sincerely hope one day we get to the place where Dr. King will no longer say, I have a dream, but say the dream has been accomplished.
Right now, it's a very contentious and sensitive time to be talking about race. But the thing is, you know, we cannot heal from the things that we are too afraid to confront. And so it's important for us to have these conversations about race. And so let's talk about how these conversations show up in school. So in school, what is the importance of race and culturally relevant teaching?
Kids aspire to be what they can see. Education that is absent of racial and cultural awareness and exposure allows kids to mimic something that does not encompass all that they are. As a Black girl in the school system, I've yet to experience something other than the fleeting lesson about Rosa Parks or Ruby Bridges. I am so fortunate to be in a space like the Harvard Diversity Project that appreciates all that I am and infuses that into the curriculum, but not every kid has that. HDP has provided me with a space where I can see examples of what I can become, and it shows me how I don't have to leave any part of myself behind in order to be successful. Racial and cultural awareness in teaching is a tool that can be used to empower youth to proudly and authentically be who they are and step into spaces on equal ground as their counterparts.
I agree with Iffy, especially with learning in an environment that values race and culture affirms my belief that seeing is believing. Many of my achievements have been inspired by successful Black men before me. Nigel Walker, an Eagle Scout for my troop, inspired me to become an Eagle Scout at the age of 13. Keith Harris, an undefeated Harvard debate champion, inspired me to become the youngest Black male to win Harvard's international debate competition. My current internship under Dr. Ugwanali, a renowned orthopedic surgeon, has continued to inspire my desire to become an orthopedic surgeon. Role models like this demonstrate that being Black excellence requires seeing Black excellence.
I think beyond coupling, obviously, the teaching and the experience, which allows scholars to put information into context, I want to relate it back to the quote that those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Culturally relevant teaching is what reminds us of a past that isn't so distant. It's what allows us to coin terms like modern day slavery and recognize the civil rights movement began in 1954, but the fight for rights has been ever so urgent in 2022.
Still to come, getting involved, what we can all do to help our kids grow. But first, a Sunday supper question to think about. What's at stake if children learn about our racial history, and what do we risk if we don't?
So I want to ask you all one more question. You know, as we're talking about, you know, cultural relevance and teaching, really fundamentally, we're talking about how to make sure that young people see themselves in the curriculum that is being taught to them. And the reason why is because we must return to a place where we put humanity at the center of education. And so it's not just about education though, like as far as school is concerned, you know, that also applies to civic engagement, you know, and so, you know, people are always asking, you know, why don't young people care more? You know, and one of the things that I share with people is that young people are not disinterested. Young people are disengaged. There's a difference. You know, we have a responsibility to engage them. And so I want to ask from your perspective, what are the most important factors when it comes to getting young people more civically engaged?
The most important factor for youth civic engagement is a fundamental understanding of why any of it matters in the first place. For me, I didn't understand the importance of interaction until I stepped into the Harvard Diversity Project classroom, and I learned how the conglomeration of our stories paints a narrative of our lives. So to everyone watching, I asked, what could possibly have that much control over your narrative that you can't interject your voice in the ellipses? What holds you back from adding your story to history? By answering these questions, I found that I put limitations on myself that barred me from reaching my potential. And when the youth find things that cause them to have conviction, they have the power to penetrate people's spirits. And that, coupled with an atmosphere curated for their continuous growth, is what allows for a moment to be the start of a movement.
To build off of Zayla's point of making youth understand, when you say the terms politics or government to youth, they often appear far removed from them and are only things that adults worry about. If the youth can't vote, why should they care? In order to get youth more civically engaged, you have to make politics personal. You have to show them how it doesn't just apply to people who have the power to vote, but it affects each and every person. And once you do that, passion will spread like wildfire.
Zayla and Iffy said it best. It's really about creating that personal connection, whether it's in politics and getting people to go vote, or you see an area of town that's scarce of food, so you go help with the food drive, or through debate like the Harvard Diversity Project does, learn about problems all around the world. That's even helped me solve problems in my community. What the youth needs to understand, and what we've gained and come to learn, is that we all have these problems. And the best thing that we can do is just go help out another person.
Up next, how we can live the legacy of Dr. King through the words and wisdom of Dr. Beverly Tatum. But first, a Sunday Supper question to think about: how can we support children in creating a brighter future?
Here in the cradle of the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy lives large. As we explore the idea of what do we teach our kids about race, we look no further than President Emerita of Spelman College, Dr. Beverly Tatum. She's the best-selling author of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? We'll let her explain where we go from here.
If we want to interrupt the cycle of racism, so that the next generation doesn't have to struggle with these issues the way our generations have, then the thing we have to do is educate ourselves, educate others, and take action. The conversation, the dialogue that you've been participating in is an important part of that process. Sometimes people say, well, you know, when we have conversations like this, we're really just preaching to the choir. I like to say when someone says that, is the choir needs rehearsal. Ask yourself, if you think of yourself as part of the choir, are you singing as well as you could? Would you sing better with some practice? Most of us would. And so it takes practice for us to become as effective as we want to be. It takes practice for us to be able to sing in a way that inspires others to join us. This conversation, the conversations you've had this evening, are part of that choir practice. I hope it's been a positive experience for you, but even if it's left you feeling a little uncomfortable, and it might, think of it as growing pains. These are things that we do when we're getting ready to really sing well. So I hope that this evening has been an important one for you. I hope it inspires you to learn more, share what you're learning, and take the action that Dr. King called upon us to take every day in our lives, not just on this weekend. I want to thank you for your time, for your investment, your commitment, and I hope I hear you singing very well soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for this special Voices for Equality MLK Sunday Supper. I'm CHERYL PREHEIM. We'd like to thank our partners with Hands On Atlanta and the Harvard Diversity Council for making this possible. For more information on the efforts of Hands On Atlanta and ways you can get involved, go to 11alive.com or check out the hashtag MLKATL22. We leave you with the sounds of sensory artist SIANA ALTIISE.
I was born by the river in a little tent, oh, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. It's been too hard to live, but I'm afraid to come, come.